Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies. And this is The Apron, Its Traditions, History, and Secret Significances by Frank C. Higgins. The Apron, Its Traditions, History, and Secret Significances by Frank C. Higgins, FRNS. An American Mason of long ago. Ancient sun god of the Mayans, one of many such statues found by Lopronjan in the jungle forest of Yucatan, relics of a civilization which had perished long before America was discovered by the Spaniards, wears the symbol of 3 times 3 and a Masonic apron. Fiat Lux. Brethren, this little book is issued as a challenge to the driest dust of the fraternity, who have too long been amiably permitted to prate of the totally unsound and eventually to be exploded myths of Masonry. It is also a proclamation to the whole world of philosophic and religious thought that Masonry is the original vehicle of divine revelation. To the devoted, untrying, and indispensable Vice President of the Magic Society, Sir Knight, companion, brother, and friend, John G. Purdy. The writer inscribes it as a tribute of esteem and appreciation. Frank C. Higgins, New York, February 24th, 1914. More ancient than the golden fleece or Roman eagle. The white leather apron. The lambskin or white leather apron is an emblem of innocence, the distinguished badge of a Mason. Thus, it was presented to us on our first entrance into the ancient craft, Masonry's first gift to the neophyte, and thus it was presented to the initiates of centuries ago in the ancient mysteries. A sign and token that the virile energy of manhood was not inconsistent with sexual purity, a symbol of that control and restraint upon the animal passions and carnal lust, which prove a man free, slave not even to his baser self. The apron means all this to Freemasons, but it means more. There is something better than the cold chastity of the purist, something stronger than the placid purity of the devotee, something nobler than the icy innocence of the ascetic. This apron comes to us, Freemasons, as a symbol of service, the badge of our Masonry, sign and token that we are builders. To every Mason comes his work, or if it does not come, it is for him to go to it. To some it is given to do great things. To every Mason is it given to do greater things, striving not to do better than others, but day by day to be better than self, and also day by day to make the world better for others. So is the lambskin or white leather apron presented to the entered apprentice, not in reward, but that it may be worn as the uniform of a high and holy servant, an emblem that is symbolically adorned with that noblest of mottos, Ich dien, I serve. Thus worn, the apron can be soiled only by sloth, can be stained only by idleness. It is purest and whitest when worn in self-forgetting labor for others. The apron, its tradition, history, and secret significances. The truest proofs of the time-defying antiquity of the Masonic craft will not be found in documents or dates, but in the only manner in which it was expected by our venerable founders that they would be preserved, in the hidden mysteries of its symbolism. Preeminent among these stands the Masonic apron, without which no Mason of whatsoever rank is deemed to be clothed, so long as the erection of the spiritual temple upon which he is engaged is still incomplete. Its presentation to the newly entered apprentice and the beautiful allocution accompanying the gift are episodes in the life of every master Mason, which remain indelibly fixed upon the mind in afterlife, and which are heard repeated over and over again with the same reoccurring pleasure. The sentimental hints and associations of the apron have therefore suffered no lack of panegyrist, so that perhaps no other symbol associated with Masonry has been so celebrated in prose and poem as this, emblem of a life intense, held aloft from the world of sense, of the upright walk and lofty mind, far from the dross of earth inclined. It would almost seem, therefore, that the possibilities of rhetoric and rhyme have been exhausted in behalf of the distinguished badge of a Mason, or, if such be not the case, that further effort would always continue in the same direction. It will be the purpose of this paper to consider the Masonic apron from a totally different and altogether new standpoint, that of an archaeological survival. We are deeply interested in learning whether the sweeping claims of great antiquity and surpassing nobility put forward for the apron in the eloquent language of our ritual are founded upon other than an attempt at grandiloquence, for we must certainly recognize that statements are made which can only be true or untrue, without the slightest guarantee being afforded of their justice or clue given to their origin. If the claims made are well-founded, we are then certainly in the presence of a monument of the past, to the adequate explanation of which it would be impossible to grudge either the time or the labor expended upon such a task. There is certainly not a single hint afforded to us by any of the monitorial explanations which we hear in the lodge, and comparatively little in the observations of standard commentators. The following will serve as a fair average specimen of monitorial appreciation of the Mason's apron. The lambskin, or white leather apron, is an emblem of innocence and the distinguished badge of a Mason. You will observe it is not rounded, but a perfect square, and its right angles inculcate truth and honesty, the great lessons of morality. Its 4 equal sides are to remind the wearer that in innocence he is to practice the 4 cardinal virtues: temperance in word and act, fortitude in a noble purpose, prudence in wisely judging, and justice to the humble and greatest alike. The flap is an equilateral triangle, whose 3 sides refer to the 3 attributes of God: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. The 2 strings remind us that reverence for and the practice of the Masonic virtues inculcated by the apron should be bound to the heart and conscience by double ties of love to God and man. The apron with its flap represents the material and the spiritual. The numbers of the apron's sides, 4, and the flap, 3, constitutes the sacred number because it makes up the perfect figure of a square and triangle. The number also refers to the 7 liberal arts and sciences, much revered among Masons, and which, according to the legend of the craft, were the foundation of Masonry. There is one peculiar significance about the lambskin, and that is, it is one of the first symbols of the Masonic life and also the last. When deposited in the grave of a departed brother, brethren, think of the lambskin and ponder well the great lesson it teaches. Even the casual reader will not fail to observe the palpable misstatement about the flap on the apron being an equilateral triangle. Were this the case, the point of the flap would reach almost to the bottom of the apron. It is also a favorite comment of many orators upon the symbolism of aprons that the unturned flap represents spirit standing above matter, and that the turning down of the flap indicates the descent of spirit into matter, characteristic of the regenerated soul. This, however, may be regarded as one of what are sometimes called unconscious prophecies, because the idea is certainly a happy one and the symbolism thereof most perfect, and yet the sequel will prove that this is by no means the final solution. Probably the most complete and circumstantial compilation of facts bearing upon the Masonic apron at the dispensation of the craft is the excellent article upon this object in Mackey's Masonic Encyclopedia, which says, "Among the Israelites, the girdle formed a part of the investiture of the priesthood. In the mysteries of Mithras in Persia, the candidate was invested with a white apron. In the initiations practiced in Hindustan, the ceremony of investiture was preserved, but a sash, called the sacred zanar, was substituted for the apron. The Jewish sect of the Essenes clothed their novices with a white robe. The celebrated traveler Kempa informs us that the Japanese, who practiced certain rites of initiation, invested their candidates with a white apron bound round the loins with a zone or girdle. In the Scandinavian rites, the military genius of the people caused them to substitute a white shield, but its presentation was accompanied by an emblematic instruction not unlike that which is connected with the Masonic apron. The apron, says Dr. Oliver, appears to have been, in ancient times, an honorary badge of distinction. In the Jewish economy, none but the superior orders of the priesthood were permitted to adorn themselves with ornamented girdles, which were made of blue, purple, and crimson, decorated with gold, upon a ground of fine white linen, while the inferior priest wore only plain white. The Indian, the Persian, the Jewish, the Ethiopian, and the Egyptian aprons, though equally superb, all bore a character distinct from each other. Some were plain white, others stripped with blue, purple, and crimson. Some wore of wrought gold, others adorned and decorated with superb tassels and fringes. In a word, though the principal honor of the apron may consist in its reference to innocence of conduct and purity of heart, yet it certainly appears, through all ages, to have been a most excellent badge of distinction. In primitive times it was rather an ecclesiastical than a civil decoration. Although in some areas the apron was elevated to great superiority as a national trophy, the royal standard of Persia was originally an apron in form and dimensions. At this day it is connected with ecclesiastical honors for the chief dignitaries of the Christian Church, wherever a legitimate establishment with the necessary degrees of rank and subordination is formed, are invested with aprons as a peculiar badge of distinction, which is a collateral proof of the fact that Masonry was originally incorporated with the various systems of divine worship used by every people in the ancient world. Masonry retains the symbol or shadow. It cannot have renounced the reality or substance. In the Masonic apron, two things are essential to the due preservation of its symbolic character: its color and its material. 1. As to its color, the color of a Mason's apron should be pure, unspotted white. This color has, in all ages and countries, been esteemed an emblem of innocence and purity. It was with this reference that a portion of the vestments of the Jewish priesthood was directed to be white. In the ancient mysteries, the candidate was always clothed in white. The priest of the Romans, says Festus, were accustomed to wear white garments when they sacrificed. In the Scandinavian rites, it has been seen that the shield presented to the candidate was white. The Druids changed the color of the garment presented to their initiates with each degree. White, however, was the color appropriated to the last or degree of perfection, and it was, according to their ritual, intended to teach the aspirant that none were admitted to that honor, but such as were cleansed from all impurities both of body and mind. In the early ages of the Christian Church, a white garment was always placed upon the catechumen who had been newly baptized, to denote that he had been cleansed from his former sins, and was thenceforth to lead a life of purity. Hence it was presented to him with this solemn charge: receive the white and undefiled garment, and produce it unspotted before the tribunal of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you may obtain eternal life. From all these instances we learn that white apparel was anciently used as an emblem of purity, and for this reason the color has been preserved in the apron of the Freemason. 2. As to its material, a Mason's apron must be made of lambskin. No other substance, such as linen, silk, or satin, could be substituted without entirely destroying the emblematic character of the apron. For the material of the Mason's apron constitutes one of the most important symbols of his profession. The lamb has always been considered as an appropriate emblem of innocence, and hence we are taught in the ritual of the first degree that, by the lambskin, the Mason is reminded of that purity of life and rectitude of conduct which is so essentially necessary to his gaining admission into the celestial lodge above, where the supreme architect of the universe forever presides. The true apron of a Mason must, then, be of unspotted lambskin, from 14 to 16 inches wide, from 12 to 14 deep, with a fall about 3 or 4 inches deep, square at the bottom and without device or ornament of any kind. The usage of the craft in the United States of America has, for a few years past, allowed a narrow edging of blue ribbon in the symbolic degrees to denote the universal friendship which constituted the bond of the society, and of which virtue blue is the Masonic emblem. But this undoubtedly is an innovation, for the ancient apron was without any edging or ornament. In the royal arch degree, the lambskin is, of course, continued to be used, but according to the same modern custom, there is an edging of red, to denote the zeal and fervency which should distinguish the possessors of that degree. All extraneous ornaments and devices are in bad taste, and detract from the symbolic character of the investiture. But the silk or satin aprons, bespangled and painted and embroidered, which have been gradually creeping into our lodges, have no sort of connection with ancient craft masonry. They are an innovation of our French brethren, who are never pleased with simplicity, and have, by their love of tinsel in their various newly invented ceremonies, effaced many of the most beautiful and impressive symbols of our institution. A Mason who understands and appreciates the true symbolic meaning of his apron would no more tolerate a painted or embroidered satin one than an artist would a gilded statue. By him, the lambskin and the lambskin alone would be considered as the badge, more ancient than the golden fleece or Rome eagle, and more honorable than the star and garter. The Grand Lodge of England is precise in its regulations for the decorations of the apron, which are thus laid down in its constitution. Particular attention is called to the latitude and the dimensions of the apron permitted by the foregoing rescript, which might result in a 12 by 14 or 14 by 16 inch diameter with perfect propriety. The 3 or 4 inch fall of the flap is equally indefinite, the whole showing that the apron, as it is considered up to this present explanation, is by no means a work of precision, nor is it considered in any other than the various symbolic senses commented upon by bygone writers. It has indeed been put forward by a number of Masonic essayists that the Masonic apron was the survival of the badge of honor originally bestowed upon the builders of the pyramids, basing the contention upon the triangular form of the flap. But in every context, it is made apparent that no notion whatever is entertained of what the connection between the two figures might be, except inasmuch as both were based upon triangles. We propose to now show that there is a direct and most important connection, if not between the Masonic apron and the Egyptian pyramids, at least between those widely differing symbols and the peculiar wisdom to which either stood, in a way, as the representative and key. It has frequently been remarked by the writer that among all the multitude of miniature objects, amulets, carvings, paintings, and other objects found in Egyptian tombs and excavations, representing the myriad gods, goddesses, and sacred objects of the land of wonders, there never seems to appear any such thing as a representation of one of the pyramids. The only graphic allusion to the pyramid which one seems to be able to discover among the Egyptian hieroglyphics is one representing the adoration of the sun god Ra, in which Mizraim, or Egypt, is typified by a tiny pyramid between outstretched arms. It is only upon closer acquaintance with the ancient Egyptian symbolisms than is possible for regarding them as mere pictures, that it gradually dawns upon the student that innumerable figures in question are based upon mathematical and geometrical propositions so ingeniously managed as to betray no notion of their real character to the unaided perception. The peculiar talent of the Egyptians in this particular direction has not escaped notice, for it is well established that the sole means of identifying property in land, after the successive rises and falls of the Nile, had left the arable land upon its banks vast unbroken expanses of mud, lay in the hands of the geometrical surveyors. Then again, the marvelous astronomical knowledge of the Egyptians and their wealth of monumental evidence of the great skill of their architects leaves us no room for doubt as to the presence among them of the requisite skill to have accomplished even greater wonders than they did. We may briefly capitulate the fact that much of our Masonic symbolism is of papally Egyptian origin, having reached us, in some cases, directly and in others through medium of an earlier adoption by the Israelites. Notable among these symbols is our so-called mosaic pavement, which was employed in connection with vertical columns or obelisks to register the solar phenomena of the recurring seasons by means of the gradual lengthening, shortening, receding, or advancing shadows, which could be measured from day to day on the great courts of alternating black and white squares. Then again, we know the reverence of the ancient Egyptians for the famous Pythagorean triangle, so called because that Greek philosopher secured it from an Egyptian priest. In Egypt, this was apparently termed the triangle of Hor-Ammon, or Horus Ammon, the savior sun god, with the ram's head, the type being that the young spring sun, at the moment when the year began, in the sign of Eris. The peculiar shape of this triangle, which is composed of a right angle of 3 units of measure by 4, the hypotenuse of which is exactly 5, was likened to the form of an eye, the symbol of the sun god, the sun itself being termed the eye of heaven. This figure was the original type of the celebrated Egyptian amulet, the Eye of Horus, which has in course of time descended to our Masonic institutions as the all-seeing eye. Figure 1, the Egyptian Sacred Triangle. Figure 2, the Eye of Horus. Figure 3, the 47th problem of Euclid, or Pythagorean proposition. It is also known that this triangle was extensively used to conceal the great mystery of the Egyptian religion, by which its initiates were taught that the multiplicity of gods comprised in the Egyptian pantheon were after all only one omnipotent but secret creator, whom we are now able to learn by various inductive methods of great clearness, was none other than the great Jehovah, whom Moses publicly proclaimed to his people. The key of the mystery lies in the letters I, O, and H, which are also J, V, and H, which were applied to the sides of the triangle in question and publicly denoted Isis, Osiris, and Horus, while the priest knew the initial letters of those words to be the secret mathematical formula which to them seemed to be the key to all visible creation because of its wonderful application to the main truths of astronomy, mathematics, and geometry. There is a vast philosophical attachment to this wonderful proposition, of which we have especially treated in other forms. If you will read in any good mythology, the story of the death of Osiris slain by his brother Typhon, and the long search for his mutilated remains by his disconsolate widow, Isis, you will understand how the hope of humanity was fixed on the widow's son, the youthful spring sun god, I-I-U-R-A-M, as his name was abbreviated, whose birth also constituted the resurrection of his father, Osiris, with whom he was identical. The Pythagorean triangle is the same as that which is the basis of what is known as the 47th problem of the Greek geometrician Euclid. It is attributed to the latter merely because it was inculcated by him in his exhaustive treatise on the science of which it forms a part. Pythagoras obtained it in Egypt, but the Egyptians owed it to the sages of India. In Euclid, however, it demonstrates the mathematical fact that the sums of the sides of a right-angled triangle are precisely equal to the square on the hypotenuse, and Euclid exhibits this problem by showing the squares of 3 and 4, or 9 and 16, to equal the square of 5 or 25. This problem was, however, perfectly known to the forefathers of our race, thousands of years before, and was made the center of a philosophy far exceeding in importance the simple proposition defended by Euclid. It can be shown in many ways that the Chaldean Magi developed the whole theory of creation, which afterwards became incorporated in the Bible from its critical examination. The propositions of its basic triangle, however, gives rise to the formula of several other remarkable triangles which were used to great effect in the elaboration of the philosophy of divinity throughout the entire ancient world, especially those two which possesses, respectively, a base of 4 parts and a side of 3, and a base of 5 parts with sides of 4. Figure 4. Triangles and towels of the squared circles of equal perimeter and equal area. These particular triangles have the peculiarity that the base of the first is the side of a square and its vertical axis the radius of a circle equal in area to that square, while the second shows the base of a square with relation to which the vertical axis is so very close to the radius of a circle of equal perimeter that the Egyptians really accepted it as such, although it goes a mere trifle over the mark, and there is a secret way of discovering the exact truth, which they also possessed. Now, in multiplying the squares of this famous Pythagorean problem equally by 4, we secure the following figure, which is based upon the Magian philosophy, was really based because the 36 squares corresponded to the sun, or Osiris, or spirit, which was accorded that great number in the great mathematical philosophy of the ancients. The 64 square represented nature, or Isis, or mother, and the 100 square, figure 5, the essential angles of the key diagram, figure 14, human destiny, as worked out in the scheme of the fall and redemption of man. All these abstruse propositions are fully and circumstantially treated of in our Origins and Symbols of Masonry. Our inquiries upon the subject of the Masonic apron concentrate our attention more especially upon the second of the 3 squares, so grouped because of the fact that from this 64 square, figure 6, our familiar chessboard was developed almost all of the symbols of that which we term Masonry. By experience, it will be discovered that the lines drawn from A and B to E will be precisely the same length as the distance from E to F, which is the vertical axis of the triangle ECD. The relation of this to the circle squaring problem is that AE, BE, and FE are the radii of a circle of almost equal perimeter to the whole square. Still more interestingly, in the circle taken as the base and the triangle ECD as the vertical section thereof, we have the precious geometrical proposition of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was long suspected that the prophet Isaiah referred to this famous monument in saying, Isaiah 19:19 through 20, and in that day there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. JHVH, and it shall be for a sign and for a witness to the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. But the presumption is made a possible certainty when we contemplate the fact that the famous Tau of the Egyptians and Israelites is the foregoing baseline and vertical axis in the proportions of 16 and 10, spelling the great and sacred name of the Almighty geometrically. The name of God expressed geometrically. This fully explains the use of this Tau figure, traced upon the doorpost of the faithful in the blood of the sacrificed lamb, a symbolism which was entirely related to the whole general proposition. This wonderful triangle was fittingly consecrated to Jehovah the God, without beginning and without end, because with its two sides opened out as a new base with the old base as a vertical axis, one of its sides as a base and half the old base as a vertical axis, or with its vertical axis as a new base with half one of its sides as a new vertical axis. The same figure is reproduced over and over again on increasing or diminishing scale, and that to infinity, always employing the same factors, redistributed according to dimensions. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.